Today's date is September 13th, 2025. This is Kelly Zacovic representing the City of Savannah's Municipal Archives. I'm interviewing Amanda Cannon for the Savannah Community Memory Project. We're conducting this interview at the Savannah Fire Department Training Center, so thank you for joining us today.
You're welcome.
Can you start by telling us your full name?
Amanda McLaughlin Cannon.
And what neighborhood are you here to share with us about
Ardsley
today?
Park.
Alrighty. So what would you consider the boundaries of Ardsley Park?
Pretty much Victory Drive to maybe 54th, somewhere in that area, Bull to Waters, although I know Chatham Crescent is actually a distinctive part of that too. But
when were you born?
I was born 2/17/1947,
And where were you born?
Savannah, Georgia.
Okay. What were your parents' names?
My father was Robert Crotty McLaughlin, and my mother was Caroline Oliveris.
So where did you grow up?
I grew up on 44th, 45th, 49th, 55th, with a slight detour to college. And then my husband and I lived on Wilmington Island for a while at his family's property. And now we have been on 50th Street since 1976.
Wow. So how has the neighborhood changed over all that time?
Well, you know, amazingly, all it's been through over time, it's pretty much the same in most ways. The schools have changed somewhat. You know, when Savannah High School left and now we have Savannah Arts, it kind of changed the look of the neighborhood a little bit. But Savannah Arts probably has, you know, not too far off from the number of students that at one time were at Savannah High, so about the same.
And has the community changed much?
Yes, I mean, I think a lot of people, and this is still the case as it was in my earlier lifetime, start off in Ardsley Park and maybe a little bungalow or in an apartment building, and then eventually move into a larger house or leave the neighborhood. So, you know, people wanted to get out of more of the city dwelling into more suburbs, although Ardsley was a suburb to start with.
So where did you go to school?
I went to Charles Ellis Kindergarten, Charles Ellis Elementary School, Richard Arnold, which is now a SCAD building on Bull Street, and then to Savannah High School. I did attend Armstrong for a year, transferred to the University of Georgia. So hung around the neighborhood pretty much of the time.
And what brought you back to Savannah?
Well, it was my home, and it's where I got a job when I first started working, so.
So are there any important leaders in the neighborhood or community that you'd like to tell us about?
Well, over the earlier years, a lot of the political leaders probably lived in the Ardsley Park area. I mean, we always hold up Mayor McLean, Malcolm McLean, who was the mayor for a good period of time and was really instrumental in keeping things calm during the civil rights era. And then today we have Nick Palumbo, or Palumbo, however pronounces his name, who's on city council. Leaders other than that have just changed over the years. There's always somebody to take up a job when somebody else leaves it, so.
Anybody notable any other names we should know that aren't quite mayors?
Well, maybe it'll come up over in my brain eventually, but not right this minute.
So either when you were a child or now, where did people in the neighborhood work?
Gosh, so many places. The neighborhood I lived in as a child, there was a doctor, there was a man that was eventually the head of Union Camp. There were military people that moved in and out when Hunter before Hunter became an Air Force Army base. It was an Air Force base, so lots of people moved in and out of there. There was an insurance agent, there were teachers. I think a real combination of all the different kinds of things. A lot of people were shift workers at Union Camp or Camira, somewhere like that.
Were there any specific churches that people gravitated towards in the neighborhood?
Well, there were lots of them. There was Blessed Sacrament, which is Catholic. St. Michael's was Episcopal. There's First Presbyterian. There's a Baptist church on Bull Street in the neighborhood. There was 2 or 3 Methodist churches, within easy reach of the neighborhood. I don't know, there were a number of Jewish kids in my classes growing up, and I think they were probably in the neighborhood once the synagogue started moving south. So Ardsley Park was a better fix for them to be close to where they worshiped.
And what about community resources or community groups?
Well, we all did brownies and Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts, and most of the time those were in the churches. Or I think Charles Ellis School had a brownie troop. There were I'd say at least 3 youth sports organizations that met at Daffin Park, and that's where the football games and softball games were played. And then I think sports started being taken over, like in middle school age. The school system ran those. So that was probably the youngest that people played on a school team. Community organizations, there were garden clubs, which are still in existence. I'm trying to look over the neighborhood and think of what different people did. Just whatever was normal at the time.
Do you want to tell us any more about the garden clubs? What kind of work they do and stuff?
Well, I don't know too much about them, not having ever been a member. As a child, I used to go to a little garden club, a junior garden club that the Ardsley Park area had. But since then, I know they've done a lot of beautification in the what we call the circle parks in Ardsley Park. Like one at a time, they have done beautification, done a great job. But not having been a part of it, it's hard to talk about it any more than that.
So you mentioned youth sports and stuff. What did kids in the neighborhood do for fun?
We frequently, as a child, we frequently rode the bus downtown to go to the movies. There were movie theaters. There was the Victory Theater, which was on Bull, right off of Victory Drive, just north of Victory Drive, which had cartoons and cowboy movies on Saturday mornings that everybody went to. My brother, who was a year younger than I, was at the movie theater when the projector caught fire. And so all the kids went running, screaming out of the building. And he called my mother to come get him because parents just dropped their kids off. Parents weren't there watching the cartoons and the cowboy movies with them. For fun, we played outside from the time we finished breakfast until the time we were called in for supper. So, it was good, it was fun. People like to remember it as idyllic, but I think it's probably what kids today do, but just to a lesser extent of being outside anyway. And lots of them played sports, like I said, or you went to Daffin Park. The pool at Daffin Park was the community hub in the summer. Everybody rode their bikes over to Daffin to get in the pool. And then you had to go home at lunchtime because they closed the pool down for a while. When I was really young, before polio was under control with the vaccine, everything kind of closed down in the middle of the day because the idea was, I think, that polio was rampant in the summertime, the contagion was, and that somehow it had to do with you needed to take a nap and you needed to rest, I mean, we always had to come home and eat lunch and rest before we could go back out when it was really hot. Of course, that ended up not really having anything to do with it, but you know.
What year was the movie theater fire, roughly? Do you remember?
Let's see, my brother was born in 48, and he was probably, you know, like maybe 6 or 7 when it happened. So early 50s, early to mid 50s.
Did you ever go to sporting events at Grayson Stadium?
We did. The high schools played football in Grayson Stadium. And there was a big Thanksgiving game every year between Savannah High School and Benedictine, when they were mainly the only two around in the area. And then professional baseball teams would come through here, I guess on their way to Florida or back from Florida for spring training. So everybody would always want to go if the Yankees came to Grayson Stadium or whatever sports team came. And then there were local teams that played at Grayson. But you know, it was a big deal even with the little league football teams. They would have like a little homecoming game, and girls would have the corsages, the big mum corsages like the high schools did. So they're all trying to act like they were a little older.
Nice. Have you noticed a difference, like especially with the sand mats and now the bananas at Grayson Stadium? Interest in the area or anything?
Well, the Sand Gnats, I think, had a small following, and everyone was satisfied with what they were doing, but they just couldn't make it last financially. The Bananas, that's a whole different ball game. That's not baseball. But anyway, it's great. You know, it's been great for Grayson to keep it alive, because there was talk of tearing Grayson Stadium down when the Sand Gnats left, and no more semi-pro teams would be, or pro teams would be out there. So it's a good thing. Put us on the map.
Definitely. So were there any businesses in the neighborhood?
Yes, Waters Avenue was lined with all kinds of little family businesses. There were grocery stores and a soda shop. I'm trying to think, there was like Kleeman's had a grocery store, and then there was a drugstore in the next block, a variety store. I think it was This and That variety store, and then the Victory Soda Shop. And so everybody, as kids, we were allowed to walk down to Waters Avenue and go to those places, you know, when we were in probably 5th, 6th grade. And it was fun. It was a gathering place, especially the soda shop.
And those were on the south side of Victory?
Yes.
Waters?
Yes. Most of them, well, all of them were between Washington Avenue and like 51st Street. Then eventually, there was a pharmacist named Whitke, and he had a pharmacy on the east side of Waters and like 54th, 55th, that is now a 7-Eleven. But that was a pharmacy, and that was just out of our range of where we were allowed to go. But Whitke's was kind of a center for that part of Ardsley Park.
So is that where people in the neighborhood would go for the grocery store?
I don't know whether it was big. You know, it's hard to gauge what kind of shopping it was because they were small stores. But yes, I think probably neighborhood, you walk down there. I know my mother shopped a lot at places on the north side of Victory Drive, like Smith Brothers, the A&P, Winers. They were all supermarkets that were down there. And then there were some little small family-owned grocery stores too, and they would deliver the groceries. They had a delivery guy on a bike with a big basket, and he would ride out and bring the groceries. And you know, everybody got milk from the dairies in those early days. Be on your front porch in the morning in a little glass bottle, and so that was Annette's Dairy, that was north of Victory Drive on Haversham Street. Starland Dairy was on Bull Street, north of Victory Drive. There were other dairies, but they were not in close proximity to Ardsley Park as far as I remember. And you know, I'm talking about all of this as when I was a child, but my daughters, I have 3 daughters, and they all grew up on 50th Street, and they all went to Daffin Park. Not to the pool. I think there were years in there that the Daffin pool closed and was not in good repair. But they also did their their elementary school sports and all were in Daffin Park. So.
And where did they go to school?
They went to Blessed Sacrament, and then all 3 of them went to St. Vincent's. So they were kind of more out of the neighborhood once they got in high school, but definitely there to live.
Did that become more common with later generations, do you think?
I think so. You know, there was such upheaval in Savannah with integration, and I don't know. I mean, I worked in the public school system for 30 years, and I was a staunch supporter of public education and still am, but we are also Catholic. And it was just, and when I was a child, my family felt like they couldn't afford a Catholic education, a private school education, and so Charles Ellis was right there, and so was Savannah High. But you know, we chose to have them in a Catholic school. And I think, I'm bringing that up, but I think a lot of people started going to private schools. And so that probably did change the path of their education, where they went to school. Because there was no private high school or elementary school in Ardsley Park except for the Catholic school. So.
That's interesting, that makes sense. So you mentioned Chatham Crescent. What are some of the other surrounding neighborhoods in the area?
I'm trying to think what they would even call them. I don't know what they call the one between Waters and B Road from Daffin Park south, but that was developed and really well populated before Ardsley Park was. So, but I don't know what the name of the area is. It escapes me at the moment. Other than that, there was nothing that we called 54th going south other than whatever the street was. Then, of course, when I was probably in 5th grade or so, some of my neighbors did start moving to Kensington Park and Fairway Oaks, Magnolia Park, which were all being developed, I guess, in the early 50s that started up. So.
Is there anything that pushed them south?
Yeah, that was definitely the move to a suburban area. They could build a ranch house, you know, something new that was more popular at the time, and there was more outdoor space. You know, Ardsley Park, on some streets you live almost in your neighbor's house, you know, and there was not as much outdoor space other than like in Ardsley, the little circle parks, or Daffin, but people just changed the way they wanted to live.
So do you think that Ardsley Park was kind of an insular neighborhood, or did it have a unique character from the surrounding area?
Well, Ardsley, although I didn't live in a large, you know, I don't know what you would call it, certainly not mansions, but Ardsley does have some big, much more expensive homes. So maybe in that respect, it had a different flavor than the surrounding neighborhoods. I would say the area on the east side of Waters that's bounded by Daffin Park and B Road, that was probably more of a working class neighborhood. Smaller wood frame houses, and Ardsley, you know, although we certainly have those kinds of houses, most of the houses, I would say the majority, are brick which was the next level up, or the next, I don't know, the next period of time when people were doing a little something different as far as building houses is concerned.
Do you have any favorite memories of growing up or raised, when you came back living in Ardsley Park?
Yeah, I think the neighborliness when I was a child, most of the mothers, if not all of them around where we lived, did not work. So there was a lot more sitting out on the front steps with your children and that kind of thing, which was still true somewhat when we moved on 50th Street when my children were being born. But eventually, more of the mothers were at work, whether restarting a career or whatever. And so there was less of that kind of outdoor togetherness. We know all of our neighbors, but I don't know that in recent years, we haven't been in anyone else's home more than, a few people. Whereas as a child, I knew what the inside of everybody's home looked like because we were in and out all the time.
Makes sense. Is there anything else about Ardsley Park that you'd like to share with us?
It's a great place to live. I wouldn't want to go anywhere else. And my children keep saying, don't sell the house, don't sell, which we're not. But anyway, and I don't know if any of them ever live in it. But, there's definitely a sentimental feeling about where we live.
So you brought some photos of some downtown houses to share with us?
There was one that my great aunt lived in on Havisham, where the downtown Kroger is now. That we just kept. I mean, her daughter has probably a lot more of that kind of thing, but somehow those were in my possession, so.
Anything about that history that you'd like to share with us?
Well, it was catty-cornered across the street from Leopold's. And as Mr. Leopold will tell you these days, everybody in Savannah has a Leopold story. But when my great aunt and her husband got married, apparently it was kind of secret. I don't know. And it was kind of a secret. And supposedly they left their car near Leopold's. And when people spotted it but didn't know where they were, they figured out something was going on. So, and I think my grandmother did the same thing. I think she ran away to get married, but wasn't involved with Leopold's.
And what time frame was that?
Let's see, my great aunt would have married in her 20s, and she was born in 1900, so maybe 25, 26, somewhere in there.
And so you would go there as a child?
I did, and my oldest daughter, I can remember taking her there, and she's 51, so when she was a child. The rest of them, I don't know, I think Leopold's had left that downtown area before my next two were born, or when they were babies, maybe. They left.
And is that house still standing?
No.
No.
It literally, the loading dock on the back of Kroger is right where that house was.
Gosh. Do you remember when it came down?
I really don't. I mean, that downtown Kroger's probably been there, I'd say at least 30 years. So
it came down for the Kroger.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there anything else that you'd like to share with us today?
Nothing that comes to mind. I could talk on forever, but no need.
Okay, well, if that's all you got, thank you so much.
You're welcome.